I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose land we meet today. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. So on behalf of the ENFP Strategic Alliance of HLB Man Judd, I would like to introduce our partners, and I'll get them to raise their hands, please. So my name is Kim Kellaway and I'm Head in Clients and Markets at HLB Man Judd. We have Aidan Smith, Partner, Head of HLB Man Judd's National Not-for-Profit Group. Simon James, Partner, down the back. Fiona Dixon, Partner, Business Transformation. Nicholas Guest, Partner, Assurance and Advisory. Georgina Redouge, Partner, Business Advisory. And we actually have in our presence today Stephen Preen. Now, Stephen Preen was the head of our business advisory and works with many foundations and does some incredible work. Stephen is down the back. We don't have anyone here from CommBank today, but I will acknowledge that they're here. So our presenters today will be Aidan Smith, Fiona Dixon, Marcus Zeltzer and Pisana Mutha. But firstly, I'd like to thank all of those that participated in our not-for-profit leaders survey on financial management. This is our 4th year in terms of publishing this survey, and there's some really incredible findings and results that will be able to guide you having conversations with your board. So this morning we'll present the findings and the results. So I will just do a bit of a bio on our 2 presenters, our guest presenters. So Marcus Zeltzer is one of Australia's preeminent experts. Who wrote this? Marketing. In automation technology and workforce compliance, pursuing his passion for solving real-world business problems with technology. Marcus founded Yellow Canary to address underserviced workforce compliance issues in Australian businesses. Yellow Canary aims to challenge the traditional approach to workforce compliance with its leading automation solutions. Pisana. Pisana is an experienced legal policy, government relations and fundraising expert. She has over 15 years of experience working in for-profit organisations across the international development, family, violence and community legal sectors. In her current role, she heads up strategic reviews at Strategic Grants. Pisana uses her own experiences working in for-profit organisations to advise and guide clients to achieve great funding outcomes. So I'd like to introduce you to Aidan Smith, who will go through the findings and the results of our survey. Aidan.
Thank you, Kim. All right. So I'm going to present a few key findings from the survey. There's a lot more findings, which you'll find in the future. This is quite the amateur. The first one, 68% of respondents said that financial performance has been negatively impacted by factors such as the cost of living. Now, there was a number of other factors that people said, like the whole financial strain that people were going through. Revenue challenges, increased revenue, talk about spreading the revenue, diversifying revenue, cost pressures, and we had some comments as well. NDIS funding came short of inflationary pressures. We know those NDIS margins were penny anyway, and it's finding even tighter. We had some those in community grants previously received has impacted us. So government funding, donations as well, common donations is so much government funding, but public funding again. So we've seen that have a big impact. 85% say that rising operational costs are the biggest financial challenge. Now, to give you a bit of insight, the next one is technology upgrade costs, and it's 53%. 85% by a long shot, saying that is the biggest financial challenge, which again, great surprise. All of that's payroll to payroll costs happening with the inflation. People really feel that linked to what I talked about earlier, revenue. Trying to keep revenue ahead of that has been a big challenge. This next question was on the economic environment. So as the current economic environment impacted on planned cash reserves, and 56% said it negatively. So we had 34% saying not at all, and only 10% saying positively. So that's only 10% saying it was a positive impact, but the majority was planned reserves and negative impact. Again, that's no great shock. We've had asked questions in prior years about how much reserves that banks, entities hold. It's a wide range. Some do 6 months, some 6 to 12, some 12 months. But when you're seeing this now, it kind of focuses attention on that. Do we have enough reserves? What's the biggest risk? This one, 59% loss of major funding. Now, this one wasn't as tight as the previous one, was like 85%, I think. Yeah, good memory. I can repeat it. 85% rising operational costs. This was a lot closer. 59% was the loss of major funding. Next 57%, perhaps not surprising, cyber security threats. You know what nods cyber security is a big one just now. We see that people impacted by they're using third parties. Third parties can have cyber security, which can impact on your organisations. And the crooks out there are getting better and better every time there's something new. Look what they're doing. They come up with something new. It really is. It's something that's keeping a lot of people awake at night. All right. Last one, finance team. And this is the first one's about turnover in the finance team. And we had 60% of people say they had experienced turnover over the last 12 months. Now, that has a big impact in itself. There's stats out there. I think it's a year and a half salary it takes to replace someone. That's recruiting, training them up, getting used to the way things are done. There's a lot of organisations where people might be there for a long time. There's a lot of knowledge up here, and then that walks out the door. When that walks out the door, then how do you train someone up when that person's left? So a lot of it makes sure you've documented everything, those processes, procedures, all the stuff that's up here. Make sure it is documented. Productivity impact new people because they're learning the system, they're learning how you do things, so not as productive as before. And it can, if there's high turnover, it can impact on staff morale as well. People coming in and out the door. What's going on here? Payroll. Okay, so this first one, we had, there 45% of people said they're looking to outsource some of their finance. Of that 45%, we 49% saying that payroll was the one they're looking at. Payroll, we'll talk about this later on. Payroll is a big risk for organisations, especially when you're paying a lot. There are what we see is that organisations do sometimes have their head in the sand because they know about this, then it's not going to impact me. When it can impact you, we fault some organisations with Fair Work. It's self-reported to Fair Work. The comment we get is this is what it's like when you self-report to Fair Work. See what it's like if they come in and found an issue. Undertakings, large costs, compliance costs, interest, superannuation, etc., etc. This was increase in wages. That's not surprisingly 90% seeing an increase in wages over the last 12 months. Most of them said on average we've seen 6%. But when you look at again what's happening with the revenue, it doesn't really. It has a big financial impact when you say, okay, revenue is not going up, but our costs, our biggest cost often, payroll, is going up. Finance and technology. So we asked what's stopping you from investing in new technology, and budget constraints are the biggest one. The technology is expensive. Because cybersecurity threats, just general technology to keep up. That's expensive. However, if you fail to invest in technology, then you open up all sorts of risks to your organisations. It could be inefficiencies, missed opportunities, people hacking your organisation as well. It's not all doom and gloom. I'm now going to pass over to Fiona. She's going to talk a little bit more.
Thanks, Aidan. So with that, what are some things we can do? So just some of the key findings, just to sort of set the scene, along with what had said. So the higher turnover within the finance team. So you're seeing the increased staff costs, which is probably in part due to the increased living costs that everyone's feeling, which then drives your operational costs. It's not good news, silver lining, it's not limited to the not-for-profit sector. It's probably felt by everyone, but it is felt keenly here. And I think it also has an impact because in the survey, half the respondents had said they had an increased prices on their products or services in the last 2 years. So that must make it even harder still, really. I understand that there's also been satisfaction around the timeliness and around the finance team reporting has decreased, and there seems to be more time being spent now on low value activities, which doesn't sound very motivating. So my role here at HLB, for those that haven't met me or seen me talk before, is in head of digital transformation. So I help businesses look at or clients look at what their technology is that they're using at the moment. Do they have issues with system integration? If they do, is there something we can do about it? Is there an add-on that we can bring in? For example, if you're using Xero, is there something you can bring in to help with accounts payable, or things like that? We also review and map processes. So if you have people, your key staff leaving, how do you get it out of their heads beforehand? My general feel when I speak to clients is mapping of processes is not most people's cup of tea, but it's something I really enjoy. So I can definitely help with that. So we have a short video that we've created. It's Hope, who is our digital employee. Okay, so digital employees are like employees, they're just digital. And she will talk about robotic process. It's one of the things that we do.
Hi, my name is Hope. I am a not-for-profit digital employee here at HLB Man Judd. You might have heard of UiPath, Automation Anywhere, or Power Automate. They are tools that enable users to automate various parts of their business processes through what is called robotic process automation, or RPA. These providers are making automation easily accessible to organizations through low to no code software. At HLB, we currently use Power Automate, which is a Microsoft product included within the Office 365 package to create automation of various processes within the firm. As such, to achieve automation within your organization, it doesn't mean that you have to invest heavily in automation products. A lot of tools are readily accessible to your organization and are a cost-effective solution for your automation needs. You may ask, what benefits can I achieve from automation? Well, automation means that your employees will be spending less time on administrative tasks, and instead, will have more time to focus on the organization's mission and strategic priorities. Automation is not intended to reduce the workforce, rather, implemented so that your organization has more capacity to meet its strategic priorities. What can a digital employee like myself do for your organization? I can update databases and spreadsheets, generate reporting, download reports and documents from websites, write and send correspondence to donors, members and sponsors, prepare end-of-month work papers, and much more. Introducing automation into an organization can be a big change for employees and needs to be carefully managed, which is something HLB can assist with. By integrating automation into your strategic priorities, you can create time savings for your employees to focus on accomplishing the organization's goals.
Okay, so that was Hope. She is robotic process automation. Whenever I was looking at the report and considering in the report, there seemed to be 3 different types that were sort of coming out at me. So software automation, robotic process automation, and then AI. Well, software automation are things like if for those that use Xero in the room or a similar tool to that, you can get them all them add-ons. So whether you need to add on Dext, which is then your accounts payable, which will reduce the time in accounts payable or things like that. And a lot of softwares are now bringing out automation within their product as well, which can then make it quite useful and really change the way you do things quite quickly. RPA takes it just that bit further. So it mimics human actions. And so you can, if you have issues with integrating between two systems, for example, so you're moving one system to another and someone has to sit there doing it, you can have automation that would actually do that because it just mimics the human steps and rules. It does help to reduce the manual intervention and activities. So if you want to get rid of some of them, way to go. And then artificial intelligence. So that's the buzzword at the moment. Everyone's so excited about that. And say you have AI in any product, you are like, that can help. I think it's still early days in AI. I think that will come along, and what that's going to look like is, I think, anybody's guess at this stage. But I think it will have some interesting benefits. So then if we look at the benefits of automation in the NFP community, so you would then start to see increased efficiency and productivity because it's automating repetitive tasks. You don't need to have someone doing that, for example, because it will just start to do that for you, and you can free up time as well. It should be fairly accurate. Generally, if you set the rule, doesn't really deviate, doesn't think for itself, so it should do what you've asked it to do. So that should save time as well. Enhanced compliance. Compliance just seems to be going through the roof. So even finding a way to help with compliance is a big one. So that's where automation can really help. Timeliness, it can speed up workflows. It generally can do things faster than a human can do it. That's why it's automation. And it can then give you better data-driven insights as well into it. Some of the challenges, and look, the first one there is job displacement, and that definitely is, that definitely can be a challenge. And some employees can definitely get concerned about, is this going to take over your job? However, there was in the survey quite a lot of people that have had high turnover in their finance team and losing a lot of people. So does it actually help to secure some of them roles or tasks that you need to get done if you have an automative solution in there? Any automation, whether it's software, robotic process or AI, does need to be carefully managed. It is a big change and something to get used to. And it can be quite a sensitive topic sometimes for employees. There's no point saying technology without talking about the risks associated with it. Cybersecurity is a very real risk. There are things that you can put in place, and I think it's just being open to that now and being aware of what you would need to look at in terms of making sure things are as secure as possible. And then finally, the initial investment cost. That's probably what scares most people, and I know that that's one of the big issues or budget constraints in the report. So software automation can be fairly cheap generally because they've already built a product that takes you there. The robotic process automation is the next level. Fine. Microsoft have actually released it, which is what we use with Power Automate. And if you have the Microsoft license, you do actually get access to that to run yourself, sort of thing. So it's no additional cost on it. But it is something to consider. Generally, what you find though is yes, it's an initial investment, but then they should outweigh. It should well and truly outweigh, and it runs all the time, every year. And so you create it and you build it once and it's always there. And you don't have to keep paying it like an employee. You just pay it once and it goes and does its thing. And so then some strategies to overcome it. So making sure you're reskilling and upskilling employees. If you don't have OCR technology for your invoices at the moment, then you'd have to reskill and upskill your employees to be able to do something different from accounts payable. You're looking at something. Having robust cybersecurity measures in place, and so making sure that all is covered and you're happy with, and you've done a thorough cost benefit analysis, like just the standard, really, things that you would have to do. So what should you automate compared to what do you not automate? I think if you just crystal clear, don't automate anything that requires a human in it to have a relationship, to make a decision. I think that's the general crux of it, because even if it's a really complex process, you can automate the beginning, you can automate the end, and maybe there's a middle decision to automate, okay? It can't be creative. ChatGPT, generative AI can be, because it can generate its own content. I would probably recommend you come up with your own content. I wouldn't use what GPT to create stuff for me. But as a general rule, it can't be innovative, it can't be creative. It can just free up the time so you don't have to spend on getting to that. You can automate, so using a chatbot or a virtual assistant, for example, to deal with any like small queries that you have on your website. But to build that relationship with a client or a donor. Okay. So what is the future? AI and automation in finance processes. It's going to be transformative. I think we're still in early days, realistically, but I think it's going to move fairly quickly. Every week there seems to be a new finance technology or technology out there that has automation and now has AI involved in it as well. The Hope talked about 3 different RPA softwares, and they're in a race to try and get to the end and be the best and be the cheapest, because they can see that this is the way it's going to go, sort of thing. I think we'll see an increase in efficiency and accuracy. So you will automate all your routine tasks, would be a no-brainer, really. There'll be real-time processing. So whenever blockchain and all of them next level words come in, there'll be real-time processing. So everything will just happen in an instant, and you won't have to worry about it. So you'll have your information straight up. Predictive analytics, AI will drive your data insights. They will be able to access your data, read it, look at it against the mark, and help you make some decisions on that, as opposed to just a gut feel decision, which can happen sometimes. AI will be able to give you personalised insights into your donors, and be able to personalise insights for individual programs for your donors or specific individuals for that sort of thing. There should be better fraud detection and prevention as well, because again, AI should be able to detect any unusual patterns in your finance information. And as they become more sophisticated, they're just going to regulatory compliance. I will be all over it for everyone, because compliance. So I think if we can have something that will help us at least make sure we're still being compliant, but really find a way of getting that done. Streamlined reporting will happen. So, you'll have the systems will now just be able to spit out the reports that you need, be able to customize it to what you want, and then set up rules if you need it. Continuous auditing, which is the auditors in the room love that. So you'll be able to do that all the time, and it'll be in real time. Again, some of these things are like in the future, maybe 5 years. Right, so, and that's scary, but also exciting. Yeah. I think the roles will change in finance. So you no longer be, sitting there coding in a journal entry or checking your AR balance or your AP balance or that sort of thing. It'll be more looking at strategically. So where do I go to next? Because you won't need to do all them value activities or the mundane everyday, what is an accountant activity really. And it will really be looking at having a seat at that table to be able to, provide the insights based on the real-time data, not looking at it 3 months ago or 2 months ago or 3 weeks ago. It'll be there for you. There's going to be a big demand for upskilling. So being able to start understanding AI, being able to interrogate AI, automation, all of that as well, even in terms of changing your communications and learning the change management, because that's going to be big for everyone really. And then it should have quite a positive impact on customer experience as well, because they should be able to, or donor experience. There should be chatbots that can answer questions for them straight away. If it needs to be escalated, they're able to get the information that they need from you as soon as they need it, and you have the time to talk with them. Okay, so I think very positive and exciting, but I think Marcus has some more to talk about in terms of payroll and automation and AI, I think. So I'll hand it over.
Well, good morning, everybody. every year I come here and present the payroll section, and some things change and some things remain the same. I think since last year, we've seen a whole raft of new legislation and regulation, which is now putting more and more onus on those who can actually affect the outcome of liability. Seeing in some instances criminal sanctions for directors and officers of organisations. What I wanted to do, instead of going through the survey results and quoting the particular statistics, I wanted to just give you a bit of context behind what I've seen in the market. So over the last 7 years, I've worked with about 100 Australian employers, reviewed about, that number's already out of date, reviewed $80 billion of payroll records across award compliance, EA compliance, long service leave, superannuation guarantee, and leave accruals. And about 30 to 40% of our client base sits in the not-for-profit space. So we support universities, healthcare operators, charities, and I think it's a very challenging environment to operate in. The NFP sector has some of the most complicated awards and EAs in existence, like anyone familiar with SHADs or health professionals and support services, aged care, nurses, they're all diabolically complicated. But what I wanted to actually do is just take a step back for a second. As an employer, you principally have two responsibilities as it pertains to your employees: keep them safe and pay them correctly. What we've seen is a 30-year evolution in workplace health and safety. You know, we always used to kind of giggle about mining executives wearing high vis in the office, but now it's commonplace and it's become embedded in the culture of everything that we do. We're now very aware of physical safety. We've seen a similar evolution in psychosocial safety, albeit we're at the front end of that, and we're now seeing it in the paying employees correctly domain. But if you compare paying employees correctly with physical safety, we're still smoking in the office. We are at the very start of what will be a 30-year evolution in this sector. So what I wanted to do was just the culture of compliance, the expectation of stakeholders, regulators and legislators is that the culture of compliance actually starts today. That it's not something that you just leave to a retrospective review that you do on a 6-yearly basis, or you've moved from a reactive stance where there's been a complaint to a proactive stance. And in fact, if you look at the position of the Fair Work Ombudsman, they're saying that the obligation on the employer is to undertake regular reconciliations and to top employees up if they haven't been paid correctly. So when we're looking at, I think the key finding when we look at the survey results is that there is an overconfidence in systems. And I know as a provider of software, it's somewhat hypocritical for me to stand here and say that software doesn't solve all problems. But I think if I reflect on the last 7 years, we've worked with 100 employers. The smallest one had 11 employees. The largest one had 300. I've never seen payroll that has been 100% accurate. I live for the day, but it just doesn't happen. And this is across myriad industries. Some of our clients have spent over $100 million on their payroll, workforce planning and employee master file systems, just the implementation thereof. Across that $80 billion of payroll data that we've reviewed, the median underpayment is 0.9%. So it's not a lot. But if you just round it up, because, I'm not an accountant, so I'm not good with numbers, say 1% of payroll is about the accuracy. When we talk to boards of directors, we say, what is your risk tolerance for payroll accuracy? And I've yet to meet a director that doesn't say, we want it 100% right 100% of the time. So to look at this and saying, okay, our systems are able to ensure compliance is to suggest that a payroll system can audit itself. And if a payroll system can audit itself, why can't your accounting system audit itself? The big move now that we've seen in this domain is a move from don't tell me, show me. Demonstrate that our systems are actually compliant. Demonstrate that our payroll accuracy is 100%. And if you rely on infrastructure that sends payments one way, and isn't designed to check its own homework, then there may be a challenge there. If we look at, again, the second finding is around a potential for hidden compliance. So let me take that 0.9% is the median underpayment that we've witnessed. And again, we're starting to get a statistically relevant sample group at $80 billion. We can start to draw some insights that we couldn't do at 10 billion. If you look at the 0.9% and you flip it on its head, what it says is you can do 99.1% of things correctly. And it's that last little bit which erodes trust in the workforce, erodes trust with regulators, with not-for-profits, with benefactors and folks that are donating. So again, when we look at the survey results, there's this position where it's, oh, well, we think we're compliant, we know we're compliant, we've been told we're compliant, but the complexity really sits in the margin. Right? Again, key takeaway, you can get 99% of things right, and it's the 1% of things that will land you on the front page of the Fin Review. Again, just to reiterate a couple of different points, this is not a systems problem. Payroll compliance is not anything to do with the logo that sits on your payroll. This is a whole of business issue. The other key dynamic that we see is in organisations across industries and at different scales, we very rarely, I think there's been one or two occasions where there's actually been somebody whose sole responsibility is payroll compliance. In every other organisation, it's sort of like the Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other. And it's actually a Venn diagram between different stakeholders that and the challenge sits in the middle. So for example, you might have a master file system, which is where employees are onboarded and their classifications are set. That's owned by HR. Then you might have a payroll system, and because it's dollars, it rolls up to the CFO. And then you have a workforce management, a workforce planning system, rosters, timesheets. They're operational in nature, so that rolls up to a COO. So you don't even have a consistent corporate sponsor for this within the organisation, which is why the issue exists. But this is a people problem. It's always seen as a payroll issue. It is not the responsibility of the payroll teams, in my view, to be doing things like award interpretation, to be running off-system long service leave calculators in Google Sheets, which you can talk to data sovereignty issues. If you want to talk about data sovereignty issues, Google Sheets is a prime issue there. It's a people problem. So it's the person that's setting the roster in the first instance. Oftentimes the die is cast well and truly before it gets to the payroll system. So as operators and directors, it's about understanding what are the right questions to ask, how do we get key stakeholders together, so it's people, what's the process, and then as a very final stage, what is the platform, what are the systems that we need to put in place in order to facilitate that. Typically, organisations go the other way around. We've had a problem with compliance, we'll get rid of SAP and we'll go by ADP. Then we'll go hire a bunch of people that know how to use ADP and they follow the same processes that they always have. And then there's a big surprise where in 6 years' time, you've got another issue. And we've seen some of the earlier underpayers, the CBAs of the world, sorry, I shouldn't pick on CBA, the banks, the airlines, the retailers. They've announced 7 and 8 years ago, and they're now on their second round of wage remediation because custom and practice is what drives the outcome, not systems, but people and process. This is my last slide, but I think the why is somewhat evident, but I think especially in the not-for-profit space, you have other stakeholders that say ASX 100 companies don't necessarily have. So you've got to deal with ASIC, ATO, Fair Work, state revenue authorities, state workers' comp authorities, the ACNC, donors and benefactors. And so part of the challenge that you have is a wage underpayment or an LSL issue or a SGC compliance issue erodes trust in the workforce, but also in that broader stakeholder group. And there's a common misconception that I've heard time and time again that, oh, well, the regulators will go easy on us because we're a charity. And if you want to have a look at how that, the antithesis of that, have a look at how Red Cross was dealt with by the Ombudsman. And I think to Aidan's point, that's how they were treated for self-reporting. You can imagine how employers, the relationship when there's a compliance notice that's been issued and they're dragged into the process. So again, the key takeaway, not a systems problem. This is a people problem. It starts with getting people who are involved in onboarding employees, setting rosters, collating timesheets, all the way through to dispersing payments. Getting all of those folks talking together is the first step in this process. And if I can leave you with one thing, the culture of compliance starts today, and it's about showing me, not telling me, when it comes to compliance. I'd like to introduce Pisana too. Sorry.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here talking to you about strategies for funding success. Before I begin, I wanted to just get a show of hands from the room. Who here has met with a major donor or a philanthropic trustee in the last 12 months? Great, that's excellent. And how many of you here have been involved in formulating budgets for grant applications? A few of you. Look at that, that's fantastic. I can go home now. There are some interesting key findings in the ENFP Leaders Report, and most of them have been covered, but I just wanted to highlight the last one here, which is that 46% of organisations said that diversifying funding sources was a way of mitigating risk. And we see that with our clients. They're setting up grants programs and major donor programs in order to address some of that risk. What we know about fundraising is that it is everyone's business. Every team from your board all the way through to your service delivery teams have a role to play in building a strong and successful fundraising program. And that's what I wanted to highlight today. Just what role do you play as a CEO, as a CFO, your finance teams and your board in particular in building a really strong and successful fundraising program? We operate on a model of 7 key success fundraising and grant seeking, and because we live in a post-COVID world, I had to have a QR code. So you can scan the QR code and take the quiz around how your organisation is faring in terms of applying best practice. Let's look firstly at CEOs and board members and what role they play in building a strong fundraising program. We've got some questions here around whether your strategic plan has KPIs attached to them that measure performance. Whether your CEO and board are willing to meet with major donors and philanthropic trustees, and are they doing that as well? And whether there are KPIs in place for your board members to measure whether or not in fact participating in the fundraising piece part of your work. So what we know is that board members are great connectors and champions of your organisation's work. Warm introductions to their networks can be one of the most effective ways to build funder relationships, and we know that it is often really difficult to connect with trustees and foundations that are only by invitation only, that don't have open grant rounds. So really tapping into your board members' networks is a very effective way of connecting with some of those. Funders also want to meet with your CEO and your executive team. Often funders are CEOs themselves, and some of the strongest relationships we see with clients are held at a very senior level in an organisation. And they're also looking for well-run organisations. They're looking to see if you have clear KPIs around your efficiency and your effectiveness, and they want to know that you're collecting that data and that you're reporting on that data as well, and that that's very transparent. Some strategies that we often suggest to clients is around, if you don't have KPIs for your board in relation to fundraising, then create some KPIs, ensure they're in your board's position descriptions. Include a standing agenda item just in your board meetings so you can actually discuss with your board your fundraising strategies, but also start to talk to them about their networks and who they can introduce you to as well. We have feedback from CEOs and board members saying that they don't really know how to do that work. They don't know how to necessarily broker those warm introductions, and it is a skill set in itself to meet with funders. And so think about how you can provide the right training to your board and your executive team as well around meeting with donors and funders. Ensure that your board and executive is well equipped with funding proposals and with the right budget asks as well. And that is a piece of work for your fundraising team to make sure that they're developing up the proposals around your key funding, ensuring that your board has those, ensuring that your CEO has those as well, and what are the budget asks, because funders will want to know that. Think about finance teams. A lot of you here are CFOs, teams, and I think finance teams play a really critical role in fundraising and grant seeking. Part of the best practice approach to fundraising that we talk about is to be really clear on your short, medium and long-term funding priorities. And we work with a lot of clients where there isn't that clarity necessarily. And I think finance teams play a really important role in helping to identify what the organisation's top funding priorities are and helping teams to formulate program budgets as well. So some questions that we have for you, are your finance teams working with fundraising and program teams when they're designing and developing their programs so that their program budgets are accurate? And are they working with them in relation to the grant application? Those budgets are accurate as well. Is there a structured process for communicating with fundraising teams where there are budget shortfalls or when a program funding cycle will end? And obviously in finance, you're well across those constraints and those challenges. What are the processes in place to communicate that with your fundraising team as well and executive team? Some of the strategies that we recommend to clients is looking at undertaking a funding gap analysis at least once a year and sharing that with stakeholders in your organisation, with your executive team, with your fundraising, so that they're really clear on what the gaps are, where those program funding cycles are ending and where they need to be focusing in terms. I always recommend to clients having a fundraising working group and having representatives from your finance team on that working group so that they're across the grants that you're applying for, and they're also bringing a really strong finance perspective around budgeting and costing. And there's also real value in ensuring that when programs are designed and grant applications are has a level of oversight over budgets that are developed. I see a lot of grant applications where the figures are pretty fuzzy and funders don't really want to see that. They want to see accurate costings, they want to see quotes, and your finance team, is your best friend in terms of developing up those budgets. Finance teams are also really important once you've been successful in securing funding from a major donor. They are absolutely essential in setting up cost centres, ensuring that there's clear oversight over spending. I also wanted to just note that at an executive level, it's really important once you receive funding to say thank you to your funder, and to do that on a consistent basis as well. So it's not just one email or one letter or a phone call at the beginning of a funding cycle. It's really thinking through and mapping out the different contact points over the funding cycle where you're giving your funder love because they want that as well. You can see some examples here of really good reporting. I wanted to talk a little bit about operational costs because I think it is one of the key challenges for for the organisation in terms of securing funding, and it's definitely the feedback that we get from our clients. So just a few tips to think about in terms of how you can pitch operational costs. Our advice is always that you initially talk to your existing funders, the ones that you have really deep, good relationships with, and be really honest with them. And we know that funders often ask organisations, what is your greatest need? And be honest with them around that. I think there's a really interesting stat from the Perpetual Impact report from last year around how many applications actually asked for operational costs as part of their grant application, and only 11% did. And the year before that, it was only 4%. So don't be afraid to ask for it. Reframe the way that you talk about operational costs. I worked on a perpetual impact application for a client, and instead of talking about the IT upgrade, we talked about digital transformation and how that would impact on their clients as well, all of the positive impacts. And always link your operational costs with your impact. I really like this. It's probably hard to see from the back. I love this example because it talks about how 12 cents in every dollar is reinvested so we can be ready to help even more animals in the future, which makes you feel really warm and fuzzy. That's talking about fundraising costs. And there's 17 cents in every dollar covers the essentials to ensure we can run our organisation effectively and efficiently. So you can kind of see how being able to break this down and tell the story and the impact it has on your communities is a really powerful way of talking about your operational costs.
All right, we've got some time for, I think, some Q&A. And we'll open it to the room. We've got one question in advance that was sent to us, and that is, how do you see AI and automation evolving in the compliance space? Marcus, do you want to take that one, sir?
Sure. Where to start? I think the promise of AI has not lived up to expectation yet. I think a lot of the tools in the market now are just wrappers that sit over the top of ChatGPT. So you have to actually look at what's driving outcomes and what's actually underneath the hood. We use machine learning and artificial intelligence in our platform, but it took us probably a year longer to deploy it than we liked, because the thing that we're very, very sensitive about, which you should be too, is about data sovereignty. So where is your data being stored? Who has access to it? Who has access to the metadata that is being created that sits on top of it? So we use machine learning now for fraud and anomaly detection. So we get a whole bunch of data that comes in. We can run our algorithms over the top and say, hey, this person is getting paid a $50,000 bonus this week. Maybe you should go and check that because it could be anomalous. Unless it's my record, if that would.
Well, and Joyce.
Yeah, we slide it on. Maybe 50,000. So that's one application, but that doesn't deliver the result to the end user. What it's doing is creating a smaller haystack, right? So they say that the gardener will be the last role that will be automated, because it's a little bit of art, a little bit of science, and a hell of a lot of fine motor skills. So what we're doing there is dragging that together, like into a smaller haystack, to allow humans to operate the last mile more effectively. On the Gen AI stuff, we've seen some really interesting developments as we've built it into our platform. So there's the typical use case is you allow the user to prompt the algorithm. And so that's where you ask the algorithm, how do I stop the cheese from sliding off my pizza? And you get a response, which is super glue. And that technically makes sense, but that's what's called a hallucination. So what we've taken to, which has been really effective, is actually prompting the algorithm ourselves. So the quality of the output is linked to the quality of the input. So if we have a series of standard questions that we ask the algorithms all the time, then we can start to get far greater accuracy when we look at the routine loop. We're doing a side by side. Let the humans do it, let the machine do it, try and meet in the middle. So I think, you know, it's where all the buzz is at. But again, going back to it starts with people. What are you actually trying to achieve out of this? So from a compliance perspective, we've got a bit of a ways to go. From a business operations perspective, 80% of our operations in our business are run on AI. So for example, we use a product called Opus Clip. Go have a look at it. It's phenomenal. If I do a webinar, I've got 45 minutes of content. We used to send that out to an editor who would chop it up and put the subtitles in. Opus Clip does it instantly. The subtitles are about 85% accurate. You can then go in and just modify that. And I don't know how it works, but it seems to be able to find the highlights out of the video content. So if you go on my link tomorrow, we use a product called Buffer, which schedules all my LinkedIn posts. Tomorrow you see a video that will come out that's 100% been edited by AI with no human interaction. And that's where we're getting considerable benefits from back office functions as opposed to what we're delivering on the front office.
Sure, I had my wife's homemade pizza. No. This has been recorded, is it?
Opus Clip to do it in post.
Any other panelists want to contribute to that question? Right, we'll open questions to the floor. A question you'd like to ask? Panelist Ross.
Hi, Ross Chaplin from Franklin Shanks. A little off topic, but being that property is generally the second most expensive on your cash flow for an organisation, have you seen any organisations looking to, you know, adjust or recreate, reinvent strategies?
Ask that. I'll answer first of all that. I'm looking at the financial perspective. Yes, companies are looking at it. They're looking at the space that they've got and saying, do we need all this space? Is there a better, efficient way we can use this space? They for us, it's a large expense. You know, anyway, say that. I'll ask it to the room. Has anyone been looking at that? Look at their property costs and saying, look, this is something that we should be looking at. Yeah, get a few nods. That's something you're seeing, Ross?
Very much so. The organisations that I'm working for basically have a shred mentality on their entire portfolio. And that even starts with me coming in and looking at how they're managing their lease management systems, which quite often are an Excel spreadsheet. But the errors that occur within those are often not accounted for and not picked up. Ask a CEO of an organisation what their total property costs are, and you generally get a shoulder shrug. But I'm seeing now for not only greater workspace economies in what you've got, but downsizing and then reinventing and co-locating, and then alliances with other organisations to try to get some greater work efficiencies.
Wait, something. Anytime you see a spreadsheet, we use a spreadsheet for that. Auditor, you go. I said earlier that, you know, it's boring, except if you're audited by HLB. Of course. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Kristen Lark from the Funding Network, and we work with grassroots charities, and I guess there's an ongoing discussion about whether to outsource finance function, insource, you know, what to do with that. And then there's a constant back and forth, like we had it in-house and now we moved out and that didn't work and now we brought it in. What are some of the trends that you're seeing? I mean, I guess for me, I see that in a small charity, like automations could have a huge impact, but having access to that kind of advice and process for doing that is challenging. So I guess we're interested in finding more shared services, approaches, et cetera, and love to hear kind of what you're seeing.
You want to speak to that first? Yeah, it's something that we are seeing more of now, because that the cost of the we're talking about administration costs, which you've got to do ways, as Prasanna has told us, but got to be more ways of being efficient and looking at that. So that got to get it done right, and that's where you see people do. Oh, we'll outsource this, and then we'll bring it back out because it hasn't been set up properly in the first place. So that's documenting all those systems. What are those systems? Go through each step and documenting it, and then you find out which parts you can automate and which parts you're better off seeing that as your judgment. You can't use a bot to do that. So that's really important that you go through and first of all document all that, because then that's when you find out what you can do. Because like you see anything, people used to use systems that they don't set up right in the first place, then you're just it's going to fail. And that's why people then change their mind. We're doing restructure. Restructure again and go back to the way it was. And it frustrates employees as well. They're going to go, management don't know what they're doing. They're going back to doing the things the way we did it 3 years ago. Spent all this money changing it. So I'd say just make sure you invest that time documenting it all. And you've got a very good starting point. You go, we know we can't outsource that. We can't automate that. We can try to. That.
I have a question for Mark.
Yeah.
So you talked about the end-to-end processing payroll, that from onboarding to rostering, etc., until it reached the point of payroll. So what are the common problems you see in the upstream processes?
Well, I can just launch into my TED talk on payroll compliance and bore everybody to death. But no, look, a couple of common things. If you look at onboarding is typically done by HR. HR deals with job titles. There's a mapping between a job title and a classification under an award. We see job title drift. So the roles and responsibilities of that individual changes over time, but the process, a reconciliation isn't undertaken back to the tasks and responsibilities should be paid for under. Or you see an example we actually saw in an NFP client of ours in the healthcare sector. You had 3 jobs that had the job title team leader. I'll just make up numbers, but there was a team leader that ran a team of 4, a team leader that ran a team of 40, and a team leader that ran a team of 400. And they were all being paid at the same classification. One was over, one was right at par, and one was under. So that's an example of where you've got an onboarding process for a new employee. HR might do their award classification, but their position descriptions, but that mapping between the position description, HR function, and the award classification, workplace relations, legal function, there's a breakdown in the two there. And if you've got people on the wrong base rates, forget all the overtime and penalties and loadings and allowances that they all get proxied off that base rate.
What type of audit is it usually cover? Is it an award classification audit?
Yeah, for that particular piece of work, we see consulting firms will look at position descriptions. They'll interview management and look at the actual responsibility, because I know as a founder of a tech company, I wear many hats, but that's not just confined to tech people only. So it might be that you're called a team leader, but you do 5 different things. So what's the essence of the role? And then how does that actually marry up with a coverage? So what award applies to that person? And then what classification level and then pay point does that marry up to? And that's something that I recommend that you do every 12 months. It's not something we do. We take that as an input and base a calculation off that. But that's probably of the 10,000 ways that you can do it wrong, that's probably one of the most common that we see on an ongoing basis, is just coverage classification and the mapping to a job.
And then also, if you're an organisation looking to grow and looking to merge with a smaller organisation, for example, you may have employees that are called team leaders. Here's your organisation. When you bring them in, you need to ensure that exactly the same scenario, that they come in as a team leader and their job description is reviewed and remuneration is then reviewed. So otherwise, they're the things that we see when our corporate advisory team do a merge.
I know being definitive freaks people out, but to be definitive for a second, if your organisation has grown by amalgamation or mergers and acquisition, you have underpayment issues. Because you're merging custom and practice, you're merging systems, you're merging different processes together, and one will always override the other. And so yeah, it's one of the top 5 red flags that we hear. Like even before I've even looked at your data, if you've done an acquisition, I can, to a degree of confidence, I can tell you that you have payroll issues. But it's also not hard because I've never seen anyone that doesn't have them. So, but again, we've only done this 100 times. So, like, and I'm not being facetious. There are still thousands of businesses out there that we haven't. 80 billion sounds like a lot, but we're still learning every day.
Some organizations call it job scoping.
Yeah.
Job scoping
But
exercise.
again, it highlights the breakdown between HR, who's doing the job descriptions, workplace relations legal, who does the classification. Then you've got the schedulers and the workforce planning people who set rosters. And then you've got the poor payroll people at the end of that whole chain that are then held accountable for the outcome, even though the die has been cast the day that employee started.
I'll pass over to Karen to wrap things up.
Thank you, Aidan. I think that you agreed that our presenters were exceptional and their presentations were so informative. So our next ENFP will be held on the 13th of November, and that will be held at the at Commonwealth Bank's premises. It'll be on ESG, and it will have a bit of a different perspective in terms of ESG. And I just wanted to acknowledge Nicholas Guest, who's one of our partners, who is now the co-head of the HLB Man Judd Australasian ESG and Sustainability Committee. Don't you love a marketer? So Nick is very happy to chat about the work that we're doing in terms of our commercial clients and our not-for-profit clients. I'd love the opportunity to be able to have more conversations with us in the room here and to the board. I just feel that there is sometimes there can be a slight disconnect in terms of conversation. And look, that's even from the board down. So if we've got this report, we've got the strategic planning report, which we did in April this year. They're very robust reports now that this is the 4th year for both of them. So I'd love you to have some conversations even with your team. And the slides and the presentation will be uploaded to the ENFP LinkedIn community. Will also go out in an EDM to you. And use that, when we send that out to you, the video is here. So it gives you the opportunity to sit with your team when you have time and allow your team to look at this video, and then you can discuss, the content of it. So thank you all again. It was fantastic seeing you. So thank you.